Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, students, and friends. On behalf of National Gallery of Modern Art, Bengaluru, I extend a warm welcome to you all. We are delighted to have you with us for today's panel discussion Festivals, Public Space, and the Changing Urban Imagination, organized as part of the outreach program for the exhibition One World, the divine thread that binds humanity and nature. The exhibition invites us to reflect on a deep and enduring connections between humanity, nature, and the shared cultural traditions that bind us across communities and generations. In many ways, festivals embody the spirit. They are not merely occasions of celebration but powerful expression of collective identity, memory, faith, and belonging. They transform our streets, neighborhoods, parks, and public squares into vibrant spaces of encounter, dialogue, and shared experience, continually shaping how we perceive and inhabit our cities. Whether it is the grandeur of Mysore Dasara, the centuries old Bangalore Karga widening through the city's historic streets, or the bustling Kadlekai Parse that transforms Baswangudi into a vibrant public market space. Festivals remind us that cities are not merely collection of buildings, they are living cultural landscapes that shape by shared experience and collective memory. As our urban environments evolve, so too do the meanings and forms of public celebrations. Questions of inclusivity, ecology, heritage, sustainability, and the role of design have become central to imagining cities that are both culturally vibrant and socially responsive. Today's discussion brings together diverse perspectives to explore how festivals continue to redefine public space and influence the changing urban imagination. We are honored to be joined by an exceptional panel of speakers who works represents excellence in architecture, design, education, and research. Our first speaker, Dr. Anita Sushilan, professor and head of School of Architecture at Christ, deemed to be university, is one of India's most distinguished architectural educators. With over 3 decades of experience in architecture and urban design, she is the recipient of the National Teachers Award 2024, India's highest honor for excellence in teaching, conferred by the Honorable President of India. Internationally recognized for her contributions to environmental leadership, her research and practice span urban heritage conservation, ecological urbanism, insurgent urbanism, and the politics of urban design. Joining her is Ms. Srishti Bajaj, Director of the School of Design at Presidency University, a design educator, strategist, and academic leader with over 2 decades of experience. She has played a pivotal role in advancing interdisciplinary design education. Her work spans design strategy, sustainability, systems thinking, speculative design, and institutional innovation, making her a leading voice in shaping future ready design education. Completing our distinguished panel is architect Prashant Girish Paul, Principal Architect of Genesis Architects and founding trustee of Wadayar Center for Architecture. With more than 3 decades of architectural practice, he has contributed extensively to the passion through award-winning projects, architectural education, mentorship, and initiatives that foster dialogue between practitioner and students. And I am Darshan Kumar, the curator of the show, and I will be moderating uh, today's discussion. It is a privilege for me to do this. Mm, Over next few hours, in an hour, we'll explore how festivals animate our cities, transform public spaces, negotiate questions of heritage and ecology, and shape the evolving urban imagination. I would like to welcome our panelist speakers. I request them to kindly take their respected seats. And
Considered to be public spaces are slowly getting devoid of those functions and being occupied for other purposes. So that discussion is interesting. I mean, would you rather have a public building for a public activity, or would you rather have a public space? Uh, so 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 these appropriations of public space which make these festivals are extremely important, because unfortunately, whether it is planning of new cities or looking at new developments, these are the gray areas which you can't put under any category. I mean, no rule or law can define a city should have so much percentage of thing for this, because each city has its own way of doing it, and that is its identity. I mean, in some cities it's out in the open, in some cities it's on the water, in some cities it's in the sea. So you don't know, how do you define that this activity requires this kind of a space, because each festival, each region, each climate has its own method of celebration, if you want to call it that. So the definition of public space automatically changes.
I'm just going to take off from the idea of what you mentioned, Ram Leela Maidan, and I'm from Delhi, and I've grown up, attending every Ram Leela festival, walking the streets with the procession, heading to the Ram Leela grounds, seeing the effigies burning. But what I find interesting is this distinction between public and private space, which is, I think, these are intellectual sort of barriers that we have created to define how we live and experience spaces. But as experiences of festival, there was no limitation between the spaces. The festival started from your house, it moved to the street, it moved to a public space, or even a larger congregation space. So space and time both were very, very fluid. And I find that today, with modern conveniences, I think the biggest festivals today are shopping festivals, unfortunately. But what is interesting is for festivals and public space to be navigated through experiences. I don't necessarily distinguish between the idea of the public and the private space, especially in context of festival making or celebration, because you would go to each other's house and commute together, and celebrate the festival together, and that becomes a space of public congregation. So with respect to festivals, I would sort of differ a little bit. I think we need to go back to this idea of not segregating spaces, but letting the joy and the celebration sort of begin and end with where people are. So for me, that defines public space in some way. I don't know if I answered your question, but
I think taking a cue from what Prashant Pule has started, it's quite interesting to note that festivities are not happening in designated design spaces. They are not designed for festivities as such. There is no color coding in our master plan also that, okay, that's the space for festivities. These are appropriated public spaces. So it's, I think at school also, we engage with a lot of discussion on third space, because a space may be designed for a particular purpose and we repurpose it for something else. So my area of interest is also on protest. For during protest also, people occupy spaces and the demonstration starts. And it's never designed for the protest. Similarly, for festivities also, I think they are not designed as such. They take that space. Other interesting thing, I think, to continue the conversation is that many of our traditional festivals have been more connected with religion. Uh, and religion, I don't think, or I don't define them as that which is connected with the divine or the God, but the divine is something which is more environmental. I think something beyond it. The science that it talks, the religion talks is much beyond what we understand as religion, at least in a very immediate perspective. What I understand is that religion is seen in a very narrow perspective, but religion was talking something truths of environment. So if you look at most of the festivities, it is also connected with weather and climate, and hence the harvest. If you look at Kadlakai Parishe, it's nothing but a harvest festival. It happens in November, December, that time, and all the produce, agriculture produce, you bring it to Gavipuram or Bull Temple, that region, and you celebrate. It was there since a long time. Similarly, if you look at the Karaga festival also, it has a lot to do with water. I think the Shakti worship which happens, and it's nothing but it happens on the Chitra Masa or March, April. During that time, it's again the harvest time. And it's the full moon during the harvest festival that they celebrated. And for harvest, you need water and celebration of water. And the Shakti worship is something which is unique and indigenous, tied back to that place earlier. But the interesting dichotomy of our existence is that urban spaces have transformed. We are no longer agro based. So what happened to the festival? Do we really understand the meaning of festival? That's a big question. But as Srishti ma'am was also mentioning, I think there is a changing realm of landscape of festivities happening right now. If you look at Bangalore's most interesting festival, it's a musical festival, especially in Church Street. I think on Saturdays evenings, I think it's an amazing place to be in. So the festivity of the current times, of contemporary times, are slightly differing. If you look at Vasanta Haba of Nrityagram, Pradima Bedi was the originally been the pioneer for initiating that particular haba. It's a festival of classical dance and music, and and it's from dusk to dawn. That's how it is defined. It's a very interesting newer festivities. So I think, is it time for us to redefine what is a festival and how do we celebrate? And my third point is on public building and public spaces. I think earlier, if you look at it, a public building was the temple, and the open space beside it is the public space. And if you look at Kadlakai Parishe also, the temple, the Bull Temple, is something beside it. Right now, we find it so difficult. You have to stop the traffic to make that celebration happen. As part of Kadlakai Parishe, you have the Tepolsava also in Kempabudi Tank down south. Uh, or west of the temple. That's also very interesting to how they connect the celebration on water and also on the hill. So the hill and the water becomes something which is synonymous, because without the hill, the water cannot come, because much of Vrishbhavati's origin is inside Gavipuram cave, because there is a spring and it goes like a gupt, or it's a spy, and it comes out at the tank and you get the water. And so there is a lot of redundancy, and people are reinventing public spaces. So that's something very interesting. Kadlakai Parisha, if you know about it, if you've read about it at least, the events happen in different rendered out spaces. It's not in one point. It happens in a play field or it happens in the Kembabudi tank, because whatever open space pockets we have, we hire all that, and then the celebration starts. So it's quite interesting to understand how we reimagine the existing condition of the urban, and then still we are celebrating, but do we really understand the meaning of that celebration? All this is a big question. Okay, so I stop it at that. Okay, I think take the discussion forward. I think recently we had an international studio at Hanoi in Vietnam. And we happened to come across a lot of artists come together and produce that they celebrating waste on the street. And there are like three nodes selected, and there are like pop-up models and stucco work, and a lot of thinking happened in a collective sense. People participate to make that those. And those installations are really good. We have a good documentation of that as well. Uh, but it's one of the so-called illegal occupied area, which is near the Red River of Hanoi, because you have the Mekong Delta, which is in south. This is in the north, Hanoi. So this is a very interesting way in which the celebration happened. The material that they used to celebrate, it's nothing to do with religion or it's nothing about music or art, but the artists are participating in this beautiful festival of engaging with an issue which is made into an opportunity, made into a celebration. You are celebrating with waste. It's quite interesting proposition. So I think it's
No, the point you made is, I mean, in continuation with what I was saying earlier. The distinction between public space and public building is, public building today is like what you said, are places where only certain people can go into because they are paid spaces. I go to a museum, I go into a mall, or I go into any of these so-called public spaces. They are not is it truly public in the sense that not all classes of people will feel comfortable moving into those spaces. So in that sense, they are not secular or they're not 100% democratic in that sense. The two things which define truly public is one, it has to be free. It can't be paid if it's public. And two, it should be able to allow just about anybody to walk into that space. Now, that is the distinction which I was trying to bring, saying that when you say public building against public space, today, unfortunately, the public buildings are doing all this. They're how do you say, very subtly telling you you're welcome or not welcome, and they're also charging you for being in that space. So in that sense, not truly public. Whereas in a festivity, like what she was also saying, I mean, there are so many festivals. I mean, in Bangalore itself, if you say the Chitrakala Parishad art festival, which happens every year, Chitra Sante, or the Bangalore Habba, which happens. Now, there are ways in which a city celebrates or finds new meanings or new ways to celebrate, which probably didn't exist earlier. Which is nice. I mean, for a new generation of people, they are finding meaning in or reasons for which to come out together and do something else, which probably their parents or the earlier generations didn't do. You are finding new meanings and new causes for which to you find different ways to celebrate. I think that is interesting. But then the next question is, or the next provocation would then be is, do people actually meet during festivals now? In the sense that we celebrate a festival, absolutely, no denying that, but do we actually meet, like she said, do you actually go to each other's houses? I know it happens in Delhi. but,
Bangalore traffic doesn't allow
no,
it.
we meet in all other places. how often are you actually going to somebody's house as a family and then spending time there, or they coming to your house, or a group of families getting together and then celebrating the festival the way you think you need to celebrate it? That is not happening anymore. Now it's a commercial activity, saying that you buy a product for a festival. The Diwali you need to buy this. Dasara you need to buy that. So there is a commodification of that festival, and saying that if I have all those things at home, I have celebrated this festival. The rest is not required. People are not required actually. The commodities are required.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that I've been reflecting on this idea of the festival is that so you have festivals that are community celebrations, right? Then there are festivals that are paid, and they're essentially a whole group of tribe of the same kind of people, the same ecosystem getting together in certain hygienized spaces. But for me, if I were to really call it a festival, beyond the idea of a celebration, I think for me the value of ownership of space. We talk about situated spaces, we talk about placemaking. Um, the idea that a completely cross intersection of people can come together and own an event, a spirit of that festival or that religious belief or sentiment or faith in any kind of emotion or philosophy. I think for me, that is what festivals are truly all about. And I think that living in urban cities and centers, we have sort of lost some of that. And I think that's the sad bit. I don't know my neighbor at all. You could live in your own apartment and not meet any, or not even need to meet anybody for a few years. But what festivals did was it allowed people to congregate without agenda. You were only coming together to sort of celebrate, enjoy, and get together and have a shared identity, a shared culture, a shared history in some sense. I find that some of those conversations, some of those meeting spaces are no longer happening. They're always driven by agenda, whether it's a literature festival, whether it's, and it's a type of literature festival, it is not privy to all kinds of literature either. There is a kind of music festival, it is not all kinds of music in that festival. And there's nothing wrong with that, I'm not demonizing any of it. All I'm saying is that it's a public space, as we were talking about, you negotiate that organically. It's not structured to be embraced in a particular kind of way. I think for me that distinction that's happening today is rather sad, and I wish there were more organic, more interesting sort of encounters, as you started saying, on the street besides the house. So that I feel is missing in urban cities for sure.
I think I might sound a little technical. Uh, Something which is quite important is right now these public spaces are either publicly owned or privately owned. We don't see something in between. There used to be a tenure, very different tenure called common properties or common tenures. Who owns the land will not be the people who uh, do the or produce or maybe celebrate or whatever, who use the land and who takes the fruit of whatever is being produced. I think Eleanor Ostrom has come out in a very beautiful manner what the governed by the commons. There is a book on that. it's quite interesting. I think we have forgotten all these tenures. I think the moment people start owning, or in a kind of a microcosm or in a decentralized manner, people start owning it. I think the celebration, its meaning, the way we occupy, the way we kind of restructure it will all change. Right now, all this property is owned by the state or maybe by the school or whichever is the community participant. But more or less, it works like a private space. So we need to kind of intervene and understand what is the common tenure and what are the potentials of that. And probably common tenures are more possible way. The other question is about do we really understand the meaning of what we are doing? I think this Adi Perukku, which is a festival in Tamil Nadu. Adi means it's happened in the month of Adi, and Perukku is flood. So all the women go out to the water to receive flood. So everyone is so it's the flood is happening in the river Kaveri, and you're much away from Kaveri also, but you go to the well or go to the pond or some anywhere the water body is there. So there is an imagination of that big Kaveri in even in a small Kamandalu. Like when you do the Shraddha, you put your hand and say that, okay, I imagine all the five rivers to be there, and I'm offering this for my ancestor, and like so there is an imagined that macro which comes into these micro places. So everyone knew when it comes and what has to be done, and there is a common deliberation. So I think in the curriculum, especially for small children, I think we teach them all the 3 R's, that is reading, writing, arithmetic. But are we kind of sensitizing them, bringing them closer to climate, harvest, festivities, water, uh, the changes in the weather, all that, it's very important. If you look at the curriculum of Belgium, cycling is one of the subjects for the younger children. So just imagine, along with studying, they have to learn cycling invariably. Every child has to learn cycling, and when they are out in the streets, they have a long flag. And so is it a subject for us? Maybe it's not a subject for us or a course for us, but we do need sometimes to sensitize these things because the child is the next ambassador, we feel. And I think it's very easy to make the elders learn about some of the truths if the child speaks about it at home. So I feel we need a restructuring of what we teach in schools, and also these tenures which it should be given back to the people. Then people will know very, very creatively, they will use it. Okay. Mm. Mm. Mm.
Uh, so in fact, why Mysore Dasara happens? Why do you go?
I know.
I mean, we go again and again. For what reason?
For the spectacle, I guess. So many elephants.
Maybe for the wild one.
There's also nostalgia, I'd
Yeah, I
say,
guess so.
for sure.
So
No,
I believe you have to connect your roots. That happens from your home.
no, somewhere. I mean, even as how do you say, as people who how do you say, want to look back at these things and say somehow I need to get this back. I think somewhere there itself we fail, in the sense that the first question which would probably come is, why do you want it back? It lived its time. It did what it was meant for. and probably it served its purpose. You need to find probably new meanings and new ways of engaging with the same subject. Probably the subject probably is where she came from, saying that predominantly as a society we have become a society which is across the globe. It's not just us, which delights only in the eye, whether it's products, whether it is spaces, whether it is cities, whether it is the phone that you have or the way you engage with your phone or everything else is so dominated by just this one sense organ, which is the eye. So what you see is what you like, and that is your way of engaging with everything that is out there in all the choices that you make. The rest of your senses are numbed. You don't, like you said, you don't see the sky. How many of you actually saw the stars? So you don't see the sky, you don't sense smell. Uh, it has to come through a bottle or through perfume or whatever else. It has to be in your nose only, then you probably understand it. Otherwise, most of your other senses are kind of numb to all the rest of it that is happening around. And probably festivals were the only way, like when you're talking that you have to connect back to water, you connect back to land, or you connect back to nature or the trees or whatever it is. Most festivals were a way of that engagement, basically. That engagement which kind of reminded you of something, saying that you offered something here, or you burned something there, or you brought a product from the field from somewhere there, or from the forest somewhere. So there's a way to connect with the natural world which is out there, and hence sensitizes you as a human being, saying that your five senses are engaged in some ways when that festival is happening. And that is unconsciously done. Nobody is telling you that this is being done for this. Unconsciously you realize that you are engaged in some ways with your entire body in the making of that or in the celebration of that festival. Today unfortunately none of that happens. We like I said, because we have commodified it, the product that is associated with that festival is what you see and enjoy. The rest, I mean, the packaging of the Cadbury's dabba or whatever else that is for Diwali or Dasara, that becomes more important, and that becomes the thing that you want to have at home, saying that this is about this festival. The rest of it probably takes a back seat. So I think that is the key. I mean, if you're saying the festival is about a way to I mean, looking at your exhibition also for that matter, as artists also, I mean, the whole point is you're in some ways or the other trying to engage with society, but you're also trying to look at in the background, how does all this fit in your own existence in the larger context, as part of the universe, as part of nature, as part of something else, and the everyday things that are happening around you, the commotion, the wars, the this, that. I mean, that is your immediate reaction to what is happening to in your immediate reality, if you want to call it that. But there, you step back and you also look back at the larger picture. I mean, it's like ancient man till now. You still look up at the sky and say, "Why am I here?" So that question is still there. So you can still go back to the larger question, and then at the same time engage with your day-to-day realities of reacting to economics and Trump and wars and all the rest of it, which is there immediately in your face on a daily basis. So that negotiation is interesting, and in that context, the larger picture, then, since I started it from there, is the fact that even in college, when we are teaching, working with students, saying that you need spaces for interaction, you need where people will meet, you need where people will do this and that, and then you suddenly sit back and ask, when do actually people meet? Everybody comes home at 11 o'clock in the night. So where are the spaces where people actually meet, and why would they want to meet there? And then you realize your largest social platform is Twitter and Facebook. It is not a real platform anymore. It is there somewhere out there. It's a virtual platform, and that is your biggest social circle. That is where you find your friends. That is where you find your likes, dislikes, and your entire social spectrum is actually out there in a cloud, if you want to call it that. It is not even in physical space anymore. Now that is the reality of this generation, if you want to call it that, and you can't negate it. And that's a new reality. I mean, that's where you celebrate, that's where you do all your stuff. So now how do you negotiate that with what you call as physical reality, saying that do I need physical space for it, or am I happy with my phone?
Um, I think the question with respect to what designers and architects can do to sort of relook at festivals and in this domain, I think so. There's a little bit of a dichotomy here for me personally speaking. I feel that there's a certain way in which we're evolving. So one has to question whether the way the festivals used to exist will exist, like you're mentioning, in the future as well. Do we really want it? So if me as a designer or somebody as an architect comes in and say, "Oh, let's create a public space and we will make sure people are able to come here," now that's synthetic in some ways. So the question is whether, even if we provided those spaces, are people willing to come forth and engage? Or are we so happy in our own private worlds and Twitter worlds that we no longer need those common spaces? So do we allow, I mean, it's a both a moral and a cultural question. Do we allow ourselves as surgeons to come in and say, "Hey, let's make this happen, let's bring people out," and people are like, "Well, I'm not really interested." So where do we stand as a society? I think that's the larger question. The fact that we do have wars going on, there's a lot of chaos in the world, and maybe we're trying to sanitize our lives more and more and more. So we sort of distance ourselves from some of the engagements outside our own private worlds. The idea that nature was very much connected to your lives, and your calendar was the festivals. You wouldn't know which part of the year you were in unless there was a festival to mark that time and place, which doesn't happen anymore. My year is defined by how many leaves I get from work, right? Even if there's a festival, I'm not really able to go and celebrate and engage with it the way it was intended to be. So does our sort of contemporary lives even allow for festivals to happen, and whether we should force it? So that's the question. I don't think I have an answer. I'm not giving you an answer. I'm just saying, there, how much synthetically can you make it happen? Sure. Sure. Absolutely. I mean, the devil's advocate in me is arguing that, people who are doing it will do it anyways. They'll find and make their own spaces. They don't necessarily need formal interventions to say, "Hey, I'm going to give you a space now. Come and do it here. It's going to be better." People who are doing it will eventually make their own space and place.
I think just to add to it, I think we are doing a lot of social cocooning. That is especially in a bus. I can be in my own world with my own friends, The space is so vast. But at the same time, how many of you have watched Christopher Nolan's Odyssey? I think at least some of you would have watched. It was so difficult to get the tickets. We have Netflix, we have YouTube, many things are available, but still people want to go and watch a movie. Nolan's movie Odyssey, which is right now, I think it's running in the theater, and it was so expensive also the tickets. I'm not saying that it's a public space, but we can come out of these spheres of engagement with these virtual spaces into physical spaces. We do want it. So I think from social cocooning to out in the space, I'm developing a course on insurgent urbanism also. Insurgency is strikes. So I think it's very interesting to look at this umbrella revolution which happened in Hong Kong. Imagine the whole lot of people coming out with a silent, peaceful march holding an umbrella because Hong Kong didn't want to be part of China. So that's what their cause is. So do we lack a cause? Okay, so they wanted public space. They had to come out, and who and how did they communicate with each other? It is this virtual medium. And if you look at the number of leaders, it's not one leader, it is multiple leaders. And who were the organizers? The institutions were the organizers. Maybe the driving force behind, making the people move in hundreds and thousands and 10,000 move out into physical open spaces to protest. So that means there is a strong cause and people are speaking something. So do we lack cause? I'm just reversing the plate. Do we lack cause? Or are we just kind of obsessed, as sir was mentioning? It's more the visual sensory which is getting more enticed, or we go there for this commodity, or maybe the color or the spectacle of it. So I think we need to kind of revisit these. The cause for me to be there when your father is taking you to a festival versus you taking your child for a festival, it's different now. You sense the difference, like yeah, again. Yeah. Mhm.
This is a debate which happens in academic level and in the
And
professional
it's a
circuit
pedagogical
also,
question
and
also.
it's always there. And I mean, why are all cities looking the same? I mean, it starts from there. I mean, why is it that every city you go to looks the same? All the buildings are the same, the same glass buildings, the same streets, the same trees also sometimes. So exactly. Exactly. So what kind of made cities different was actually this. I mean, every city had a particular character or a certain way of identifying that you're in a particular city. Is basically number one. It's the people. There's a culture of the people itself. For example, there's a lovely discussion on speed versus space. The two words actually mean the same thing, but then there's a huge distinction between the two. We are in a big hurry to make our cities extremely super efficient because your Zomato guy has to come to your house in 5 minutes. The big basket fellow should deliver within 10 minutes. The pizza guy is 11 minutes late, he doesn't get his payment. So we are making our cities super efficient, which means that your infrastructure, whether it's roads and metros and bridges and all the infrastructure of pipelines and water supply, everything has to be super efficient and has to work at extremely fast speed. Now that is how every city wants to be because that's how it will work or that's how it will survive, which makes all cities in sadly look the same. But at the same time, every city's identity is defined by its space. In the sense that I would rather be in Mysore because Mysore is sleepy. It's got nothing to do with the roads, it's got nothing to do with anything. It's just that the pace of the city is like that. People are like that. There's a culture of the place, there's a culture of the people which makes that city slow. There are no darshanis in Mysore. You have to sit on the table, have your idli dosa, take your time and go. Nobody's in a big hurry to go anywhere. So darshanis don't work in Mysore. So that is the pace of the city, as against, let's say, you pace of Bombay, where everybody is in a mighty rush to go where God knows, but they're in a huge mighty rush all the time, 24 by 7. So like that, every city has a pace, but the speed is constant. The speed across all cities is the same. So the identity of a city is defined culturally by people, by place, by festivals, by all that, basically because the city develops a pace. And the city is then defined by that pace, which then automatically demands public space, demands people to pause, because people would rather be like, if I say I was in Calcutta, or I was in, let's say, Kerala, you require places for protest, because every day morning I am standing with the flag. I need to know where do I go now, which is the latest protest in town. So whether it is, so there are cities like that where people are mighty kicked about doing this, about continuously being in some activity of that, of some kind or other, which then demands public spaces of that kind, because the people are inclined like that. They need public spaces for these kind of activity. It not necessarily not festivals. It could be protest, like she said. It could be ways to engage with the government, or whatever else it is. Or in Delhi, probably it's this huge grounds where the festivals are massive. I mean, if it's Ram Leela Maidan and something is happening, there are lakhs of people. Or let's say you go to Ahmedabad and it's Navratri. I mean, that entire riverside is filled with people for that 9 days that are there. So every city's identity demands public spaces of a different kind. Unfortunately, we have this tendency to paint all of them the same. I want to make Bangalore like Singapore. Why? Or I want to make something else like Dubai. Why? I mean, each city is unique. The people are unique. The culture is unique. The way they occupy public spaces is unique, and what they do in those public spaces is also unique. I mean, we have a Kaban Park where you'll go and do nothing. You don't celebrate anything there. There is no festival, anything or any kind. It's just the people enjoy the park. It's nice. So our public spaces are different as against, let's say, Delhi's public spaces. So I think that is the key, in the sense that you don't need to have a meaning for those places. It's just that the people of that place demand a certain way to inhabit that space. Maybe climatically, maybe probably in Kerala, because it's hot and humid weather, you would rather be outside under a shaded space rather than be inside anywhere. You want breeze, you want the cool air on your skin, so you would rather be in places like that. Hence, the kind of public spaces you occupy are different. Unlike, or let's say, Bangalore, where the weather is super cool all the time. So you would rather be outside than inside. Unlike Delhi or Ahmedabad, where 6 months of the year you would rather be inside. I don't want to be outside. So your engagement with public space also is a climatic, cultural, social. It has so many layers to it in terms of why people move out and occupy certain public spaces, and which is why public spaces in each city, the size, the scale, the location keeps varying. That, unfortunately, when you're making a new master plans or whatever we're doing as expansion for cities today, it does not figure anywhere in that. I mean, how many public spaces has Bangalore added beyond the so-called Kaban Park, Lalbagh, and three or four which are there in the center of the city? In any of the new layouts, you go to Koramangala, you go beyond anywhere, HRBR, Outer Ring Road. What public space, which playground, what has been added to the city, which you say that this is new, this was not there before? Nothing. And that is a fact with every city in the country today. The new developments don't look at these layers, which is what he's probably arguing for. And I totally agree with him on that, saying that it's not necessarily festivals, it's how the people are in that particular, and they need that space.
I think Prashant has given it a good tone to the entire sense of public space and what happens in the public space, and how culturally it differs from city to city. But I think the question is about pedagogy. How do we sensitize our students to be or read such uh, uh, intangible things? Yeah, I think we did a very interesting exercise with photography actually before we start the studio. So we do engage with literature, photography, caricature, and different kinds of smaller exercises, and filmmaking for that matter. So one of the films is about uh, one of our studios was conducted at Chitradurga, and we started the studio inside a cafe because we didn't want to start it inside the studio per se. So the The cafe, so before we do that, actually, we need a lot of precursory understanding of what Chitradurga and all of that. So the very important food, two foods which they very indigenous with Chitradurga, are two very interesting food. One is khali dosa, and the other one is ragi mudde with kolisaru. That is ragi mudde with chicken curry. So these are the two foods. All this was done, and we started our first discourse in Mysore Cafe. There is a very important cafe in Chitradurga which is called Mysore Cafe. Now we have to sensitize our students about what we are looking at, which place we are in, and why it is called Mysore Cafe when you are sitting in Chitradurga. So it kind of takes them to kind of read the history, not for the sake of, okay, Tipu once came here and now conquered this place, or this was part of the Mysore provincialate province before, and hence the Mysore Cafe was a very stately term which was given for the cafe's name. Now, after having food, we got a bill which didn't have that time. It was done quite some time back. It didn't have the KST number, that is sales tax number. So it immediately gives us a clue that it is not legally going. So then we asked, like we befriended the person and we asked from where is this all coming up. So then we find that Chitradurga is the highest producer of ragi. But who fixes the price of ragi? Bangalore. All the ragi which is produced in Chitradurga's landscape comes to Bangalore market to fix it. So what the people, they revolt. They, some of them are like not joining this particular move. They keep some ragi to themselves. And there is an inner market which is running. So APMC feels that they have weighed all the ragi which is produced in Chitradurga. And the accounts are not correct. There is another huge tonnage of ragi which is circulating within the city by the people, and the government unfortunately calls it illegal. Okay, and these are run by the khanavalis. So imagine, how do you kind of start from a small food to a bill to khanavalis and the markets, and then we do urban design for that. So it's a very interesting turn which we make them do to understand and be aware of your immediate surroundings, because you are reading many things beyond what actually it is. The other interesting exercise we did was in Shivaji Nagar. We did an exercise again in an urban design studio. So what we did is everyone had to do a photo essay. The shutter speed was made very slow. Okay, so that means a lot of light is going to enter into the through the lens. Now they went photographing in and around Shivaji Nagar. They had to, each one had to get at least around 10 frames and develop it. In MG Road, you see only streaks of light. As Prashant was mentioning, the speed of the city is far higher. But there are a lot of inner streets within Shivaji Nagar. The images are stunning. You won't believe it. That means the speed of that place is far less. So you learn uh, the speed, which is actually a component of what we are going to technically discourse within the studio, but it came from art or photography as a technique, and it was an amazing set of exercises. Then we also looked at how the vendors use non-conventional energy to light up their stalls. All the photographs had to be like that, and discuss about it. What kind of energy do they use, when do they use it, how long can it stand, and how do they get resources for that. And the third thing was a film on transgenders. I think these are certain things which we never pay attention to. I think we have to, we as designers have a social commitment. We need to be kind of responsible about many of these things. So they followed one of this person who is called Lakshmi, and who actually sweeps in Shivaji Nagar. Imagine the people are accommodating them, but the design, as a designer, we are unaware about their way of living, and where do they kind of sleep, and how do they come to this place, do work with dignity. That is very important. Are they denied dignity? So I think as designers we need to be aware of all these things. So we have certain pedagogies which are set for the school to make them sensitized to be aware of what the place is about. It's beyond visual. You can't read many things what you see. Things are much beyond it. So I think there are ways in which we can sensitize them.
So, in design school, there is a pedagogy that has been sort of followed for many, many years. It's sort of like a translocal immersion. And the idea is that the student or a bunch of students are situated in a community for about up to 10 days, oftentimes around a craft community because they need to understand the object or the craft making. It could be object, it could be paintings, it could be anything. So the idea is that the student or a bunch of students immerse themselves for about over 10 days, and they live with the artisans, they live with that community, they understand their routines, they understand the ritualistic practices around um, the object that they're trying to study and why it's the way it is, and how it has also evolved over the years. And of course, there's, the documented, they also look at contemporarizing it, because oftentimes times design is also about contemporary production. So not just archival, but looking at how it can be more sort of suited to contemporary living, and also expanding or exposing it to a larger audience. So these are practices that are often followed. I think the question of going and studying a context versus rediscovering your context, your own context. I think the way festivals evolve or can be looked at. One is I go and immerse myself in a festival that's not inherited, which is what happens in traveling. When you travel to a different city, you immerse yourself in that culture and you experience it. Um, but how do we get people to really look at their own, historical cultures and be able to contemporize it either, or at least find a way to stay connected? I think that is much harder than simply going and saying, hey, that's very interesting, I'm going to look at a festival, and uh, I can study it and I can bring something out of it. But as a living heritage, um, I don't think we've yet cracked that.
Multiple questions, but one thing I obviously wanted to ask is how do you look at the role of non-functional art in architecture or even in urban spaces? It means that how do you look at visual art? And do you also put effort to look at beyond design to be in structure and types of urban spaces to look at or showing or build in certain way? Do you look at beyond design and make things like art?
I think this is a question we always discourse within the studios, because many a times architecture is misunderstood for, okay, let's take these walls which are made with certain materials, and but architecture is about that space which is contained by the enclosure. We make enclosure with many different ways. It can be very artistic. Recently we had a paper folding origami exercise. Origami exercise is a basic design when we indulge within fashion technology studies. It is looked at as a material and it's a wraparound, and it's, but the moment it comes to a spatial designer, it's a space that is contained by these wraps is what we are trying to look at. And I think art has got a lot to do with this space making, which we cannot see it actually. Till we make it, we can't see it. We can only experience it. So this is something which we tell them right from the beginning. Uh, One of the principles. The second is to disown, because who occupies the space is very different from one who designs it. That's a different one. But yes, how do we create that kind of enclosure? Does art has a role? I think your question is that. Yes, definitely it has a great role. Does structure has a great role? Yes. No, if you think in that perspective, I think the way you make that space, and because the space has always been there, you're not adding or you're not deducting. But how much you gather and how do you make it feel? And that's architecture. I think architecture has a lot to do with what artists, because it's the artist who can work with that material and make that sense of enclosure, thereby we can actually celebrate that space.
We ask this question because once spaces are important,
Mm.
so if we look down or think about
Yeah.
so ideally, they are artistic to artists per se.
Yeah, I think it is completely missing. It's completely absent, especially in Bangalore.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, correct. Yeah. Mm. I think if you go to uh, Ghent in Belgium or Antwerp, the number of bridges they have, it's such an aesthetical pleasure to look at the design of it, the structure of it, the kind of very idea it is, with which it is conceived. But look at our metro stations. I think.
Very boring.
I think we have to really rethink about what, and I think we need to reduce the distance between architecture and art. There used to be
Ab- um,
We have such a distinctive, artists from the state, or we have distinct architectures. So why don't we reclaim? Because is it a for public place, so we don't think about it, or there's no ownership of it.
I think there's a certain issue here or argument to be had with respect to governance and policy making. Because a lot of these public spaces are governed by a certain level of who is invited to represent something on that wall, right? You, on the other hand, you have people like the street art folks who've been going around and doing amazing, amazing artwork all over India. But especially, and I mean, I'm more familiar with Delhi, so maybe I can give that as an example. And same concern. I mean, there are new tunnels being built, and the sense of aesthetic is to be highly questionable. But a lot of these things are to do with who's the political decision maker for a lot of these things. So it's not intentional in any way, and I don't think as citizens we demand it enough for it to be made available for public decision making or interface. So I think there is a lot to do with policy making that one needs to get into. It's, you can do a guerrilla art, which is all over the world. It's found its place, and but now you have CCTV cameras and they'll catch you and you'll get fined and da 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 da. So it's not so easy anymore for a lot of people to interface with the public spaces with that intention of being able to create within those public spaces. So I think that's another level of conversation and discussion that one needs to have as citizens and as governance of cities. And I don't think that can only be relegated to private practitioners conversing about it. I think it needs a larger dialogue, um, and that's something I very, very seriously hold um, um, to my heart, that we need more citizen action, at least in terms of reclaiming the cities we live in.
I guess one of the problems is at the government level, or at the level at decision making, as you said, most of this is considered infrastructure. So when you say it is infrastructure, कुछ भी चलता है. I mean, क्या road बनाना है ना? So you make a road. I mean, does it have to look good or bad? I mean, nobody's even concerned about that. So when you treat it as infrastructure, then it is not something which is adding value to the city. So I mean, if I look at it in the context of Bangalore, I remember one of my professors who had come from Ahmedabad. He says Bangalore is such a lovely city to in terms of design. So we were asked him why. He said, you can build the ugliest thing here and it's all covered by trees. And it is true. I mean, that is the aesthetic of the city. So if you actually look at it in that context, I mean, what do we celebrate? We celebrate Kaban Park, we celebrate Lal Bagh, we celebrate all the green spaces in the city. And we are blessed with that amount of greenery in the heart of the city because it covers all the shabbiness. It covers your ugly buildings, it covers everything, which unfortunately cities like Ahmedabad and Delhi or most of the cities can't, because those kind of trees don't grow there. So we are lucky that we have an aesthetic of landscape, if you want to call it that, which takes care of the city. At least the central part of the 20 kilometers outside Bangalore is a different world altogether. But within the 20 kilometers of the central part of the city, we are blessed in the sense that it hides all the ugliness. Now, that could be a way of saying, I mean, instead of calling it art per se, that is the way we, how do you say, we enjoy our city. If you, the landscape of the city, if you want to call it that, or the way the city is laid out, It has its fantastic parks and playgrounds and the phenomenal trees, large rain trees, 100 feet diameter, 150 feet diameter trees, which are all there in the central areas of the city, are the way you experience this. My uncle had come down from Germany, and he's come to Bangalore after a very long time. And the minute he drove for a day across the city and came back home, he said, "How can you have so many trees in a city?" Because in Germany they see one tree on the road or two trees on the road. So for them it is like phenomenal to have a city which has so many trees. So probably that's our aesthetic. Which is why I go back to the other things also. Every city has some aesthetic like that which you would want to celebrate, and you wouldn't want to, like I said, commonalize it, saying that metro here looks good in Delhi, so let's do the same metro across the whole city or across all these cities in the country. So probably the aesthetic needs to vary the way you look at it. Probably in Bangalore it should have been underground. It should have not come up at all. I mean, if our city was about the trees and about the landscape and stuff like that, why did we have to bring the metro above the ground? So that should have been the aesthetic, saying that push everything below, because then the city is undisturbed. Now, some cities probably need to showcase that, some cities don't need to. So the way you engage with that infrastructure also is probably a way of understanding what is your city about. And then you engage with it depending on do you want to see the infrastructure. If you want to see it, will you make it good, or will you bury it, or you'll hide it in a way that it is not seen at all. There are ways in which you deal with that situation, but then, like I said, every city has its own way of, should have its own way of dealing with it, and then that defines. And second point is, across the country we have this thing which is constantly there right through, is the difference between art and craft. And for 90% of the janta, craft is art. The few of us who are sitting here, for we define our art differently, right? So for them, Taj Mahal or Vidhan Sauda or any of these things are the best buildings that the city has. Now, do you deny that? Do you fight that? Or do you accept that? So this distinction between what do you define as art per se and what do you qualify as craft? And if 90% of the people believe that something done with your hand, with a very intricate and lot of work and stuff like that, which is extremely craft oriented, for him that is art, and they value it for that. And that is what you seek in the cities also, if you want to call it that, saying that the most beautiful building is probably the most crafted building. And that is how you look at these so-called monuments in the city and stuff like that, and say that Jaipur and Udaipur are so much history, so beautiful buildings, because you value the craft in those buildings, the jali work, the this, that. I mean, you're giving phenomenal importance to the craftsmanship, which then defines your aesthetic, saying that that is art for me. Now, that distinction, unfortunately, is what creates most of the chaos in cities, because you don't look at art as a separate thing, which is why the problem comes is, then you'll call an artist or a sculptor and say, "No, put something here and make it beautiful." So you apply art then, because the rest of it is ugly anyway. Now you bring somebody and you put something there and say, "Now make it beautiful somehow, so that it's palatable, it's digestible," if you want to call it that. Anyway.
I just wanted to add one more thing to the point that you were making about infrastructure in cities. I also feel that governments also look at the efficiency of the city, right? So the idea of they're catering to numbers, so many million population, they're not catering to people and individual and cultures. They're catering similarly in terms of only statistics. So what ends up happening in a city is that you are a statistic of the city. You're not really a living entity of the city. And I think that's where I feel that a lot of decision making, we need more and more artists and architects and designers to actually be part of the governance decision making process, especially when it comes to decisions about the city. And I don't think that happens enough. So it's a personal gripe. You'll see me talk about it quite often. But I do feel that there is a sense of a layer of um, um, making a city, right? And that only comes through when you're looking at large investment, large infrastructure project, large private buildings. The contractor will pay to build the road that goes to their private, condominium, but that is it. They're not going to invest in any sense of aesthetic, whether it's art or craft. unfortunately. And I think we've become almost prisoners to those kinds of decisions.
One other thing which is, I guess, which makes the difference is most cities, whether it's in Europe or the US or wherever else it is, are the cities have a different governing system. The state has a different governing. The city has a sheriff. The city has a mayor. Unfortunately, our cities are not like that. Our cities are so, how do you say, economically driven that the government doesn't want to let go of it because that's where the money comes from. So you will not let go of the city. So if the city was actually governed by a different structure and somebody was made responsible for the city, like the latest elections of the mayor in New York and stuff like that, or wherever else it is. So that sometimes is extremely important because then the jurisdiction of and the governance of that place is under a very smaller authority, and the how do you say, the expanse is also limited. As against, let's say, you have a CM who is the CM of Karnataka, so he's got a hundred other things to worry about. Bangalore is one of those things. Unlike somebody then who's only responsible for Bangalore or only responsible for a particular city, then the governance and the, how do you say, accountability to the people who live in that city and the decisions that you're making, because you're elected by the people who are living in that city. So what you go out to say or do will then directly affect them. So that probably is the key sometimes.
Why we need negative spaces, which is the positive aspect of it. And the space is never empty, it is occupied by one or the other thing. And I think the urban space is like a festival which is organically building up without knowing the new contemporary approach of celebration. Taking shape in its own dynamics with, as a whole, looking at it as a whole. It's a architecture in itself, which doesn't have anything to cater or how you look at it. So, any questions from the audience?
Yeah, we talk about CM Kengal Anumantaya, if you remember. He has built the Vidhan Sauda. It's like they have time if they wanted to build something unique and want to give life to the structure that they build in the city or outside the city. So, as I think, it's like if you take other countries, there will be educated people who will be governing under the government. So, India is not the case. India is in different perspective, which we don't want to get into those things. And I just want to tell you that it's like people are forgetting the art in the work they do. It's like they wanted it in commercial aspect. They're not looking it in to giving a life to it and what they do. If you take even the building that they build to stay at home, they're just constructing a house, and it's like it doesn't have any life to it. If you compare to the olden days and now, they used to get the life. I mean, they used to give the life to the building that they stay in by doing other artworks and other things. And it's the materials they use is from the nature itself, and it's not artificially created things. And if you take examples of dam, also Mysore dam, it's like there are other aspects to it where nowadays the people and the education system also is background of it. It's like our education system doesn't teach how to value the art and other aspects of the same. That is my opinion on this.
Ideally, if you want to keep on money, they will bill you without any material. The simple things have become expensive because you don't use it anymore. You want me to ask any question? I mean, you want somebody to address your issue?
Yeah, if they're
It goes back to the same thing, no? Of pace and of time, basically. You had a specific way of living which occupied a certain amount of time and space, if you want to call it that, because of which you inhabited space in a much more slower manner. Unlike today, where even if I give you a great space to live in, how much time do you actually spend at home? So it comes back to that, saying that your lifestyle today probably doesn't require that kind of space at home because number one, you're not interacting with that many people at home. You walk in, you go to your bedroom, you have your own TV or your own laptop or whatever it is. How much conversation actually happens at home? and with whom do you spend time at home? So these questions come up. So how much that the slowness of things and the activities that would happen in a home are not happening in a home today. Which houses, so I keep saying this, no, we are getting more fancier kitchens. We have outside kitchen to show and an actual kitchen in which you cook and stuff like that. And there are only three people at home, and those three people also sometimes eat in the clubs and the hotels. Whereas when your moms and grandmoms were cooking, they had probably 8 feet counter, and there were 20 people at home used to come for lunch or dinner. So that's the difference. I mean, the activity that happened and the number of people that were occupying that space demanded space of a particular kind and the pace at which you lived. Today, the house is more an object to display by the people who live in the house and who themselves are sometimes guests in the house, in the sense that I'm there, but I'm actually not here. So this whole idea of, like I said, the nostalgia is nice. I mean, I would want it to be like that, and I would want it to be. But do you actually use things like that anymore? Unless, like we were having a discussion just before, unless there's this great movement going across so many countries. You know, it's called slow eating, slow this, slow that, slow that. Basically, it's that you need to slow down. That's all. So unless you slow down, you will not, how do you say, you will not create a new lifestyle for yourself. The product is anyway a product of your need. So if the lifestyle demands a particular kind of space or a particular kind of living, then automatically you'll produce it. Just asking for it doesn't help.
I think one is about the lifestyle and what we want. Do we have to redefine what we are building? All of that. This nostalgia may not work sometimes. But also, there is one more major problem. We are living in silos. I think the artist is one group of people, architects and designers are another group of people. So we are all, even within architecture, also we have different silos. So, in fact, we should come together. I think it's high time we came together. If one example which I can quote is the Bohos school of thought, not the Bohos school by itself. Bohos school of thought had a lot of artists and architects or designers coming together, and hence, good or bad or ugly, whatever it is, but there was a product which was coming out which was quite different from a very ordinary mediocre in terms of design. So the artist is also engaging with the designer. It's not that the artist is only doing an application onto it. No, the artist and the designer, they are thinking together, and most of the memorandums which they have signed, especially during the international modernist time, are together by the artist, architect, and also civil engineers per se, for one aspect of it. So I think we are missing out on all this. I think we have to have more discourses, more close contact with each other, the artist and the design schools. So I think that's something which we try our best, but because student is our next ambassador, so at least we put the seed in their mind that yes, please be with together, because it's not like okay, I go and learn yours or you come and learn mine. No, we have to work together. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So we spoke about public spaces, we spoke about festivity and stuff. For me, the way I see things is the public spaces and the festivity come together only through community. We are lacking community spaces right now. Like if I remember when I was a kid, there used to be a pulya. There used to be a corner. You go, and the serials were also like that. Only you go to those places, you take over them, the kids take over them. That is changing. The other thing that believe right now is happening is those kind of spaces are taken by political this thing right now. Those kind of spaces you will have festivity of Kannada Utsava and all those things, and then there will be a Hindu thing, and then there will be a what do you call that, Islamic thing. So that thing is changing, and what I have seen a change why these things are not working out so well, because because of these people taking up these spaces, children don't go to those spaces, and there are no public spaces for children. Right now, the people are not even making parks also. And then one more thing that I would like to add, or I would like to explore more in my own form of art also, is how public spaces are taken over by cameras. Because if I'm into a public space, like let's say I went to Kumbh, There is no space in Kumbh where you're not under a surveillance, and then you are in public, but then you are seen in so many other things also. Rather than that, I would go to a park which has trees but no camera, things like that. Those things are lacking. The best example I can give you is Gandhinagar. They have created public spaces. They have designed public spaces which are so bad that nobody goes there. It is designed very well, but nobody goes there. But then there is a place in Ahmedabad, I forgot that food street. So it's taken over by, it is actually a street of jewelers, which is, yeah, which is taken over by the food at night and then early morning, the vegetable vendors. And so that is basically the best idea of how a community owns a public space. Till the time we are not ready to build community, the public space is of no use to us. This happens in Avenue Road. We go every day. So it's the morning it's busy. Evening times it changes to into food street. Vegetable sellers, and then it becomes food street. Yeah. All the shutters come down, and that's the dynamics. Even the the commercial street used to be like that. So Sunday morning you will go there, you have a different kind of experience of it. So I guess that is what is my issue with architects or designers or whatever it is, that we are lacking that community buildings things, or what needs to be done for the children. We are already gone. We what we are going to do is being lived by other generations. So what is that we are doing for that generation? We are not even thinking about that generation. That is what I believe can bring a change. That's it. Should we call it a day or any more questions? Uh, I take this privilege to thank Anita ma'am, Srishti ma'am, and Krishnan sir for being here and doing this discussion. And a lot of perspectives has opened up. New thinking, for sure, on behalf of National Gallery of Modern Art of Bengaluru and Ministry of Culture, but also thank our guests here who have joined us for the talk. And I would like to present a small catalog. I would request my colleague Amrita to come and present our panelists.
Catch up to other outreach program since we have Rekha or with the board of lecture this this exhibition that which works at here. So this exhibition has the collection as well as the